thanks so much to everyone for joining us today. Very excited to be joined by Bill Manning here from JFrog. We are going to talk about the AI security landscape and really focus in on best practices for securing it during the AI development. We'll talk a lot about the AI supply chain. We'll talk about secure AI development practices, and we'll also talk about some secure AI runtime practices as well.
Excellent. It's been so much fun.
So it'll be a lot of fun. We appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. You know, if you want to let us know in the chat where you're dialing in from, that could be fun too. Quick intro on my end. I'm Christian. I run our partnerships at TrojAI. TrojAI is an AI security company. I have the privilege of working with really fun companies like JFrog as I'm trying to build out the ecosystem here for TrojAI. So Bill's been great. We've been working with him forever. Bill, do you want to take a minute and give a quick intro about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Bill Manning. I've been with JFrog now coming into 9 years. So I've been here since we had pre-X-Ray, our security product. I've done a lot of work throughout the time of all the various aspects of our product. Recently, over the past coming months, I've been working on our JFrog ML product and our AI catalog, which we'll discuss as part of this, as part of the go-to-market. And I'm super excited to be here and talk about this and the awesome stuff that TrojAI is. You guys are doing awesome stuff, man.
Yeah, no, we appreciate your being here too. And if anyone's been at any shows, RSA, Black Cat, Gartner, go find Bill, have him present something because it's worthwhile. We're gonna jump in here. So if anyone's kind of seen some of my presentations, I usually like to start with this cartoon that came out a year ago. Really about this small company, this enterprise that's really ecstatic about the fact that they get to use all this AI now. And then there's this one person over in the corner saying, well, what we're going to have to do now is really focus our attention on worrying about all the issues created by the AI. And I always find it funny because it really paints a picture of what a lot of security and governance and compliance teams are now thinking about in the world of AI as well.
Mhm.
And you kind of focus on this, the woman in the green here, and who is that person at the enterprise, right? Like that might be your CISO. That might be your CISO asking the questions, who's using the AI? What are they doing with AI? What kind of applications and agents are they building with the AI? Are they looking at MCP builds with AI? What types of risks is this creating for us? And if it's not the CISO, right, it's teams that are tangential to the CISO. So it could be your AI security teams, your AI governance teams, some of the data science teams, security engineering teams. We've run into legal teams that are now asking questions about this type of stuff. And as Bill, in your world, you're probably working with a lot of DevSecOps teams that are doing this early in the supply chain. So it's an all-encompassing issue that we're finding as AI kind of comes in and really extends your infrastructure. And by process of that, also extends your attack surface. So, Bill, I mean, parity here with kind of how you're seeing it in some of the teams you're talking to as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because you have ML ops now, right? And a lot of the world, we're the world of DevOps and DevSecOps. We've been doing this since 2008. And the thing is, it's funny is that we used to say every company is a software company. Now we still say that, but now we also say every company is now an ML company. I mean, the sheer, if you have an application, there is going to be some sort of AI ML component behind it. And a lot of companies are trying to adopt the same methodologies they use as part of their DevSecOps techniques in ML ops. And that's the thing is that it's a new learning tactic. Some companies have been doing it longer than others. A lot of them are, some of the upper management are like, we need ML or AI in some respect in our application to stay competitive, and they all want to know how. And then the thing is that how do you, take the new world of AI and ML and bring that into your security organization if you're fresh or knowledgeable about it, and trying to do that in the easiest way, but also too with regulatory purposes, which is one of the things we'll talk about today. The idea is how do you have accountability and attestation behind that also? So yes, we are seeing a lot of that in that same respect.
Yep. Yeah, I think, for those with us today, right, in the security world, like we've seen this story before, like transformational technology creates new risk. However, the story we're kind of finding is that not all teams are prepared to manage the risk. So we have some stats in the left-hand corner here. I'm sure since, this report came out that the adoption has probably ticked up, but the teams that are actually prepared to manage the risk that comes with it, that's probably stayed pretty flat here. But what we've seen at the same time is that AI is now an emerging threat vector, right? It's actively being exploited. It's being targeted. it's a vulnerability and a weakness that allows the adversarial actors or the malicious nefarious insiders to get access to systems, to pull down sensitive data, to do things that they're not supposed to be doing in the organization. So more and more, especially as large organizations are building their own AI applications or agents and embedding it with LLMs off the shelf or open source or fine tuned or whatever, that creates a new attack surface that is being targeted, and we are seeing that now in studies as being a kind of targeted flaw or area of manipulation. So Bill, any context there? I know you guys are doing a lot of research, and we'll touch on that, but just any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and like I said, the interesting part about it is also the learning curve, and right, there's this combination of being naive and not understanding actually all the potential threats, especially with when you think about it, with a very actually potentially dangerous kind of technology, right? I mean, the thing is that when we have this in the world now, the thing is, when you're doing your model development, your training, your fine tuning, or whatever you're doing, whether it's an LLM or a risk model or whatever you're doing, you need to make sure that the ingredients, the pieces, all the parts are safe, secure, and compliant while you're doing this, and then having on top of that, stuff that you guys are doing
Yep.
to ensure that integrity and ensure less risk. And companies are learning this; they want to adopt it fast, but also too, how do you adopt it fast while still also learning and trying to implement some sort of safety and security around that to remove, like you said, from bad actors of the nefarious and the malicious.
Yep. Yeah, totally. So, this risk landscape, it's evolving and it's maturing, right? But we are starting to see, consistency with some of the activity and the actions that are making up this landscape. And I think at the top of the list, the things that we are hearing from, customers and, inbounds and prospects, it's really around prompt injection and jailbreaks, it's data extraction, data loss, and it's toxic and harmful content. And, I would say 18 months ago, a lot of this was academia, art of the possible, but more so, especially in the last few months, these are things that are out in the wild right now. We've seen prompt injections and jailbreaks. We've seen research that pieces of malware that have exploited prompt injections to get past malware scanners. We've seen employees at large organizations that have sent very sensitive data and IP into ChatGPT, thinking that they can help work on different types of things like source code. We've seen models come out, pretty recently that have given instructions on how to, help me create a bioweapon attack or, do other sorts of
Oh,
things that it should not be doing or outside the boundaries of what is wanted or acceptable, right? So those are the types of risks that are really piling up in this AI landscape. And now, more recently, we're being asked about things like MCP risks. We're seeing a lot of adoption around, agentic tool chains that are flowing through MCP, the different layer of communication that now that brings in with the tools back to the agents. That extends the attack surface as well. And also giving agents, a little bit too much autonomy in this, entire workflow. There was something a couple months ago, Bill. I don't know if you saw it over at a company called Saster, where they were using an AI agent that actually went in and took down a production database and then
yep.
tried to hide it and cover it up, right? So this is that whole new world of, yes, this brings a lot of innovation, but with the innovation comes risk. And you really need to make sure that, this is tied down and being addressed from a bunch of different vectors that we're going to jump into on how to address these AI security concerns. How does that
Absolutely.
sound, Bill?
Yeah, and actually, what we'll do is, one of the things that's actually it's funny is that yeah, these are all the things that we're seeing too, and one of the things is that as our organization works with ML and ML providers of all different types of whether it's a streaming like with API based with like OpenAI or or Agentic or any I mean I'm sorry Anthropic or any of those all the open source models and whatnot these are some of the things we're working on. We're also starting on our side. We're going to be actually, I was going to say it, a couple of weeks from now, we have our new our conference coming up, and we're going to be talking about actually two things that are actually on this list too, such as MCP. We actually started already going through and creating and cataloging MCP servers, and we're going to be offering an MCP actual catalog. soon. I might as well say it.
Yep.
So that's going to be coming down the pike. And then
Yep.
also, too, we're also going to be addressing shadow AI. We're actually going to have a new shadow AI tool coming out in the coming months that will actually detect and let you know. And we'll talk about that too. But it's amazing, like you said, the landscape has been dynamically changing so fast. And like I said, I love that example of the idea of like, no, I didn't do it. Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about?
Right.
Like I said, it's dangerous technology, and it's like, I for one welcome our AI overlords, but at the same time, we can try our best not to allow that to happen.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think where we are really going to focus on for this webinar and for the purposes of how we're working together too is, a lot of this risk happens very early in the AI development cycle, right? There's a shift left aspect to all of this where teams that are starting to do their own builds on homegrown apps and agents, pulling down models, tuning models, they are building out a supply chain, right? It's your
Right.
traditional supply chain around, if you think of all the different components that open source and third party, the libraries, the packages, the different versions, where they came from, who has access, why do they need it? AI is now a new piece of the supply chain, Bill. And, who better than JFrog to kind of come in and say, you know what, we are treating AI as a new artifact in the supply chain. We are one of the global leaders in supply chain security. This is a new risk for us, and this is one we're tackling. So I'll kind of let you walk through the landscape that you're seeing in the supply chain early in that AI development life cycle.
Absolutely. And as I said, companies a lot of we've talked to is that, we actually, because we've been managing the software supply chain, right now, I mean, we're at the, I think it was 7,500 global corporation mark of who use our platform, right? We've actually been the company that introduced the idea of, of like how to manage artifacts and binaries, right? Way back when. And once again, we talked to companies, we said, look, the adoption that you've had of your standard software supply chain is applicable. The steps might be different, but they're actually very similar in their approach. You have your standard dev, QA, staging, production, and all that kind of stuff. Same idea. It's the only thing is it's slightly different. But also too, everybody always focuses directly on the models themselves, and that's right. You have to, whether you're pulling them, from Hugging Face. We're actually the development solution of choice for NVIDIA and their NIMS platform. We have some announcements coming out about that soon, too, with NVIDIA. I'll be presenting actually next week about that. But at the same time, it's also all the other components too, right? You're going to operationally run this probably in a Docker image of some sort or some sort of tool to monitor it. You're going to have Helm charts that are part of this. You're going to use Python packages to do all your development, or maybe R, or I see some companies using .NET and Go, whatever it is, being able to also make sure that all the other ancillary components that go into software development or ML development or AI development are also safe and secure, providing the same proper infrastructure. Like one of the things that we're doing is we're having it so that you can attach artifacts and deploy them, and in this case, model artifacts into different architectures. So you can see, is a GPU or a CPU going to be better for my model? Can I save money by using a CPU versus a GPU? Being able to maintain the life cycle of an actual version of a model. That's one of the things that we've actually solved. Instead of storing your models in like an NFS or S3 bucket somewhere, we provide better modeling. And then at the end of the day, we always talk about at JFrog software bill of materials. We've been talking about it for years, and now we're producing machine learning bill of materials for regulatory purposes like DORA and the UAI Act, and and whatever's going on in here in the U.S. because I don't know anymore because it changes every day. But at the same time, having that traceability, the accountability is the important part, and be able to have your legal teams work with your AI ML teams for protection. Have your security teams be part of the process. Your deployment teams, your SREs, everything. There's lots of pieces involved, and we've taken that for us. We've taken that inherent knowledge and we've applied it now to AI ML, and giving companies that assurance that the things that they've learned from in the past are applicable to the future and the present, even in this ever-changing landscape of AI and ML.
Yep.
So the thing is that, the next part of it is like, how do you protect yourself, right? And in the supply chain, us already as the people who can make sure that those third-party transit dependencies, whether they're in, direct or indirect, are safe and compliant. Those Docker images are safe and compliant. We're known for that. And the thing is, though, when we started looking at AI/ML, this is where we started getting into the supply chain issues, right? And some of the things that we could talk about are things that, the team here, Charles can help you with, right? Like the idea of like the data sets and things, prompt injection, model extraction. And for us, we're also looking at things like the ML dependencies. We also have, making sure that, those platform vulnerabilities, we can actually monitor your runtime in terms of security. And all these things are things that now you have to keep in mind. Not only have your application potential attack vectors and attack surfaces out there, now ML has its own set of troubles. And on our end, we're ensuring that any of the base foundations that this AI ML stuff is going on, those models that you utilize, are safe, secure, and compliant. And we could talk about that and the fact that we do research on that, and we'll do that in the next section when we start talking about it. But on the other side of it is what Troj brings to the table, and I'm sure you guys can talk about these things here and how you're helping out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot to tackle, right? There's a whole new component here to the supply chain, right? It's an extended piece, and with that AI, it just brings, it brings models, it brings data sets, it brings dependencies, it brings new artifacts and frameworks, underlying model files, and that's really just like when you're getting started. And then as you're starting to bring that through, the hosting, the serving, the inference, there's new risks as well. So a lot of this starts during the supply chain, but there are risks that you need to worry about through the whole kind of ML life cycle. And that's what we're going to cover. And I think that's what we cover in our partnership. So I think Bill, you did a great job of kind of walking us through, hey, this is an early problem in the supply chain life cycle, and one that,
Yes.
JFrog is doing a pretty good job of addressing here. Um, so just generally, right, the thesis that we have at TrojAI around AI and, AI behavior is really that it needs to be tested and protected, right? And this is really how it lines up in kind of an AI development and an AI runtime phase. So in the AI development, as those types of teams, are your ML teams, your data science teams, your DevSecOps teams are pulling down models, they're doing the build, they're running the tests. You're going to want to know early as possible where the risks, weaknesses, vulnerabilities are, to kind of minimize any, costs or downtime further in production, right? You want to minimize those risks before you get to production. It's not too different from traditional shift left in application security. And that's how we are taking this problem on, is more of like an AppSec CloudSec problem in trying to find risks, insights, vulnerabilities early on, and then provide mitigation for those. So, those types of weaknesses cannot be exploited in production. So really understanding your AI behavior during the build time as early as possible, as well as continuously, and then in production, putting some sort of enforcement and monitoring and protection around that AI as well, so that you can have, inline protection to protect against a lot of those risks that we've outlined, like prompt injection and data leakages and toxic content and MCP risks. So we see this as, an integrated fabric that is, both controls at the development phase as well as the runtime phase. And JFrog, great partner, is really helping us along both of these, specifically during that AI development piece with the supply chain security, with the inventory, with the discovery, with a lot of the ability to address some of those concerns about the AI in its infancy.
Absolutely.
So, so Bill, we've kind of worked together with you guys. I know we pitched like a tandem story here, and one that we've, put together is really a comprehensive one across, the life cycle here, AI development, AI runtime. And the pillars that we've kind of come up with and we want to talk about today are, starting with the AI discovery and really making sure you have visibility into the enterprise, understanding what models are being used, more than just the models, though. It's the data sets, it's who's touching these, what versions are they, who has access, starting your traceability as early as possible. And I know you'll be able to talk about this and some of the stuff you're doing. You've also mentioned some stuff that's coming, which is great. Your next piece is really going into the scanning element. And this is more about model scanning, point in time, kind of similar to like SAS for traditional, web application scanning, where you're really looking for model CVEs. You're looking for different types of, malicious content that could be on the model, different risks that can happen, like arbitrary code execution during like model serialization or deserialization, and trying to just get transparency into the integrity of the model file. Kind of more of like a point in time. I'm pulling down a model from Hugging Face. Is this thing actually safe to use? From there,
Yes.
you want to take this to kind of more of an adversarial nature around testing the model and really checking to make sure that, it is acting the way that you would intend it to from both a safety and security perspective. right? So the way that a lot of teams are doing this now, and what we do at TrojAI is automated red teaming, and that's what we provide, which is these suites of testing which allow you to go in and assess the AI behavior for your apps and agents, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that, but it is adversarial in nature. It's trying to get as close as possible to the way a bad actor might be trying to test your application or agent. Once you've done all of these controls, kind of during the AI development process, right? It doesn't end, but once as you flip something into production, you have an agent or application running. That is when you can look to policy enforcement, right? And this is more of a runtime control where you might sit as like a real-time inline enforcement engine that looks at all the AI traffic to the model from the model. You can run rule sets on them. They should be customizable and they should provide alerting. So end to end, we are bringing this together, this kind of discovery, scanning, testing, protection elements, and helping the security teams answer a lot of the questions that are being asked kind of at the bottom of the page. So, Bill, before we jump into each of these, any context you want to provide, or does this still feel pretty good to you?
No, this is the resonance, right? And when you look at this, this is actually, this resonates with everybody when they think about this, or if they're not thinking about this, is how they should be thinking about it, right? Coming into it, you get this mandate from your upper management saying, like I said, you need to implement some sort of machine learning from all this massive data lake we have. We need some sort of AI agent to help us out. That's going to do this. We're looking to move some of our customer service over to this, right? And they're like, go. And if you don't have these in your brain when you first start thinking about it, then you should reassess how you're doing it, right? Because in this case, this is you should have these checkpoints as you go through and making sure that you have the right tool sets to do this in a nice, easy, cohesive manner that allows you to do this rapidly, but at the same time, comprehensively. So that's, I think that's a good starting point.
Yep, totally. All right, so what we're going to do now is kind of do a touch point on each of these pillars, and we're going to start with AI discovery, and who better than JFrog, who has a discovery capability, and they're also doing more discovery for other assets. But Bill, I'll let you kind of take this away, and I think you want to show it as well.
Yeah, actually, so what we're going to do is, so the thing I want to talk about is AI discovery, right? There's a lot of things here. So let me share my screen and I want to show a couple things, right? I want to kind of give you just a quick 5-minute overview of how we can help you and how you can do this the most effectively and also ensure things such as compliance and regulatory, those pieces, but since, safety, security around different aspects of it. So let me share my screen and, oh, I think you just need to stop sharing for a sec.
Sure.
There we go. And let me hop over. And so, oh, see my screen, okay. Is what we have is what we call catalog. Now, catalog is the base on which we can actually do all the work you need to do. And we'll talk about AI catalog in a minute. But what gives us the right to create something called catalog? If you look here, you can see that we actually have cataloged millions upon millions of dependencies, including 2.7 million Hugging Face models. As I stated, we actually are the solution of choice, just to kind of show you. This is my favorite model. It's the Pickle Scan Gordon Ramsay 2. I just thought it was hilarious. But, we actually provide you with information. And in this case, this is unsafe because actually JFrog is a CNA. So we're actually a CVA numbering authority. We're actually finding a lot of information. We helped with a lot of the research behind the recent Shai-Hulud attack that happened with NPM. We're actually now going in and also finding issues in publicly available MCPs like companies you're using. We've actually started to also build out massive repository on model threats that are happening in these public spaces. We've trained our security solution on millions and millions of open source models. You kind of can't get better than that. And we break down exactly for you what the potential threats are in terms of what you're doing. But having this data in some sort of consolidated single location is one of the things that we're trying to do. So, like I said, if you look here, 2.7 million, Hugging Face models. In Python land, we have 729,000 plus libraries that we've gone ahead. And we take that information and we break it down for you. And we actually have a tool called curation that is part of our catalog where you can write rules and policies to protect yourself to make sure that any of these publicly available models that you have out there don't actually have a potential threat for you. Like in this case, there's a malicious model. And we wanted to make it easy for companies to go ahead and use these open source models, but there's much more than open source models. And the thing is that when we look at that, one of the things that we've done is that we give you the ability as an organization to go in and discover, right? So this is the discovery phase of AI. And whether it's an external model like OpenAI, Anthropic, or others, whether it's open source models like Hugging Face, or custom models that you build, we give the ability to make sure that those models are safe, secure, and compliant before they even get to a testing phase, right? To make sure that even the foundation model you're using, the base model you're using, the custom model you're using is has less potential threats. When it comes to models such as, things like, using something from OpenAI, we actually go ahead and give you the information. We give you the ability to also go ahead and use a model directly through us and provide some sort of ACLs, access level controls behind models like OpenAI and others. In terms of using, say, something that is more open source, we give you the ability to go ahead and search for these inside of our catalog. You can actually select the models you want to use. We actually provide you with information on each of the models to make sure that things that you're using, and if you use our creation product, it actually gives you the ability to say whether or not you can use this model. In this case, it's being partially blocked, so but at the same time, when we are using this, it also gives you the ability to take any of these models. If you want to use it, create a quick deploy to some sort of infrastructure that you want to host it. You let it go. We supply it with the transformers. We download the model, we secure it, and we store it in Artifactory. Now you have a localized streaming model for you to use. On top of that, too, you can also use our JFrog ML product. It's called Frog ML. Surprising, right? Um, but what that does is that actually gives you the ability to go ahead and build model versions where you can actually go ahead and have your own custom models where we go ahead and validate to make sure that the operational model you're about to launch, where you can do testing, is readily available. And on top of that, we secure all the third-party transit dependencies behind it. You can do this through a CLI, you can do this through our UI, and even you can actually even go ahead if you wanted to, and we have our own MCP where you can go ahead and query and develop and build right in something like VS Code and have make sure that it follows your company's adherence to regulatory and to any guidelines that you have, and have it deployed directly into the interface. And by having that, that provides you with a level of accountability for all the things that you're doing. And that includes also things, one of the things we'll talk about in this case is also things like machine learning bill of materials. This is going to be part of the regulatory too. And also understanding, that if you're doing this, and one of the things that we'll talk about is, we have the properties here. And the part we're about to jump into so that we can keep the flow going is evidence. And this is where the cool stuff is going to happen. And the stuff that, by the way, that you guys are doing is also going to be part of our thing called App Trust. It's another product we have where you have application trust and responsibility. But all the amazing work and evidence that they produce over here at Troj will be able to go in. And from a regulatory standpoint, this is phenomenal. This is an answer to everybody's question on who has access, where is the access from, what parts of this are safe and compliant, do I meet my regulatory and all that. And now I'm going to hand it back over here to Christian, and he's going to talk to you about the fact that that information will become available and utilized. So this way, if you do have legal teams, breathing down your neck, you have a way to actually answer them correctly.
Yep. No, Bill, that was great. Thanks so much for bringing us through that. Let me get this back up here. So I think, my takeaway, there's people on here, Bill, that are probably like, I don't even know where to get started. Like AI discovery is probably a good place to get started, right? Just
Absolutely.
understanding what you should be using, where it came from, what are potential risks associated with it, who has access for what purposes, really starting that like audit and traceability. And I think from our point of view, that is a landing spot for you to now start thinking about downstream controls on it. And with that comes the scanning, the testing, and the monitoring and protection that comes with it.
And one of the things I always tell companies when I deal with them personally, when you look at here, when we talk about the AI scanning, right, the work we're doing as a CNA, the amount of information, like what we're searching for, and we provide you with, by the way, also guidelines, things that we say that can increase or decrease your risk. But the thing is, when we get to the scanning portion, I always tell every company that's starting to work with this, they should involve their security teams early to start defining the guidelines so that you're not developing something that could potentially break the guidelines by your security team. And by showing them that they have the ability to have better adherence to their policy and their policy work really can actually, in the long term, help with your AI ML development in your corporation. So by involving them early on and having those difficult talks of saying, we need to secure this before we use it is a huge win. And then if you're just starting out, this is a place to begin. You should always have security as part of your like team you're putting together to start this off.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I think, we don't have to spend too much time on the scanning because you've kind of covered it, but your X-ray tool is doing a lot of the scanning, and you are backed by a lot of JFrog research on this that's actively
Correct.
looking at CVEs associated with, again, like, if you're using pickle files and you're serializing or deserializing, if that model has been tampered with, there is opportunity there to do, arbitrary code execution, things like that, where you're going to want that point in time scan to kind of understand, like, hey, what's the integrity of this model file that I'm working with? So that's kind of how we think about scanning. The next phase is really around, after you kind of get through that point in time scan, is how do I test the behavior of the AI itself, of the application, the agent that the AI is embedded in? And that's really what we're focusing on at TrojAI. And we are building a whole thesis around the behavior of the AI. And really for this is what you're doing is systematic adversarial testing, right? You are trying to get, as close as possible to how a bad actor might think about breaking in through AI, or, doing something potentially nefarious, like, leaking sensitive data, getting past the guardrails with a prompt injection or a jailbreak, getting the model to spit out something, that could be bias or hallucination or unwanted or non-compliant, right? The objective here is just making the AI system fail, misbehave, or reveal some sort of vulnerabilities or weakness so that you can understand it and then put mitigation around it, right? If you are a large insurance company and you are building an external facing, chat application for customer support or whatever, you want to feel confident that that application is going to answer your customers as best as possible and not, spit out information that is, reeks of, biases or hallucinations or just making up, misinformation, whatever it is, right? So you want to expose those flaws and risks and unintended behaviors, and then use those to inform downstream enforcement around it. There's a lot of innovation that's happening in this AI red teaming market right now. It is a new space, right? Your traditional DevSecOps program for your traditional web apps, really centered around, SaaS and SCA and DAST, that doesn't reach the layers that comes with the model, right? The model is not just code, it's data, it's weights. You can prompt, ChatGPT 3 times and you'll get back 3 different answers, right? How do you get a sense of what's accurate, and is this operating the way that I would intend, especially if it's a homegrown application or agent? So the way that we are providing this at TrojAI is really through an automated suite of content that you can put at a target, whether it's an app or an agent or a model, and you want to see how it responds. And along the way of that workflow, it's out of the box malicious content. It's different ways to manipulate the prompts. It's responses that give you an understanding and a baseline of, is this a pass or fail and why, with context. You can do single turn testing, which is really for, lower complexity use cases. If you are dealing with an application that's prompt response, like an HR chatbot, for example, and you just want to see, is your application susceptible to things like PII leakage or, bias, hallucination, rinks, or how does it respond to like adversarial robustness techniques, that type of stuff. Or you can go through multi-turn techniques, which is really taking a more complex workflow, going through a larger conversation with the application or the agent, like if it's a customer support agent, and trying to set it up for a scenario and pulling the rug under it, right? So the example on the right here in the screenshot is a bad Likert example, where basically we're giving the application a scenario, on a score of 1 to 5, you need to choose something, with 1 being, benign and 2 being less benign. Give us examples of each. So the application is thinking, well, okay, it's really just setting me up for some sort of a game here. I'm providing examples of something that could be good and bad. I'm not doing anything bad beyond that. But by process of that, right, your application now spits out examples on, giving a Python script that can go, potentially get, root access system access to like an application, right? Malicious instructions on how to do things. So that's an example of really taking innovation with this red teaming approach to kind of like, go and set up a conversation, have your agent or your application think you're going one way and pulling the rug on it and trying to trick it. And again, raising vulnerabilities and weaknesses and being able to chart those and track them with enforcement. So that's really what AI red teaming is all about. Um, I don't know, Bill, if there's anything you want to add on that. I know it's further along from where you guys are, but it's probably something you guys are seeing and hearing about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we actually, this is, the thing is actually there are a lot of companies looking for this on
Right,
top of the standard things that, we provide, as part of this is, once you've taken it, you've tuned it, now you've gone to the next
right,
phase, which is the testing. This is the natural handoff, the natural progression of that. So yeah,
right.
this is perfect.
Yeah. And then last your pillar here around, protection and monitoring, right? So we've kind of brought you through this AI development phase. You've pulled down a model, you've embedded an application, you've built it, you've tested it, you feel confident about it, you've done some of the compliance governance mapping. Now you want to put monitoring enforcement around it. And for this, TrojAI, this is what we focus on as well, is really providing inline real-time enforcement so that we can sanitize and look at all of the AI traffic, run it against, our rule sets or, custom rule sets if you want to build those to detect things like, prompt injections, data leakages, system prompt leakages, any sort of toxic, unwanted content, right? In this world of AI security, and I'm sure there's people on here that know, like AI security is meeting AI safety, right? They're kind of a conversation that's happening under a similar umbrella here, where toxicity is becoming something that practitioners are worried about. So having very capable detections for nuanced AI workloads is becoming increasingly important. And ultimately, what you want to see out of a solution here is like, flexibility around it. Can it block? Can it flag? Can it redact? Is it customizable? Is it extensible? Is it scalable? Can I send those events downstream into something like some sort of a reporting tool or a SIM or a SOAR? Those are the big things. The example on the right is, a kind of a complicated prompt that assesses that we found a system prompt that that's looking okay, but now it's setting you up to think that you are something else. We're running it through rule sets. It passes on a block list, it passes on PII, but hey, this is a prompt injection. You're going to want to block this. You're going to want to send this to your event explorer. You're going to want to look at this. So that's kind of how we're thinking about the protection. So Bill, we've set up this end-to-end scheme. We've walked, everyone who's joined us through it. This is how we're coming together. It's really more of a architecture, but end-to-end stack. It's a discovery element. It's where's your starting point? What are you using for that? From JFrog, Artifactory and Catalog, and you guys are doing a lot in Catalog. That's a newer thing that you guys are building on, but it's a really good starting point. Bringing that through your scanning processes with X-rays, how using TrojAI for red teaming, kind of that
Yes.
extra layer of assurance and confidence in the behavior of the AI, and then putting runtime enforcement around that. And as you alluded to along this process, you are creating data that can be
Hmm.
sent back to that original starting point, whether it's in Artifactory or Catalog, wherever that team wants to see it, as they're thinking about, different checkboxes along the way. Has my AI been thoroughly tested and vetted? Are we passing compliance and governance risks along the way? How do I get a sense of that? And that's really what this evidence component is. It's building attestation and records of evidence that can be sent back to your supply chain security exercises. So I know you guys are really hot on evidence as well. Anything else you want to add about evidence? I know we're going to show a couple screenshots here, but it's a big piece of additional information, right, that provides confidence and assurance in the process of securing your AI.
Absolutely. I mean, at our conference this year, this is actually one of the key points we had during our keynote presentations was the idea of, we introduced evidence over a year ago. This was actually, I taught a class on it last year about, why is that important? Why from a regulatory standpoint? Why from a legal standpoint? Insurance standpoint? Lots of different aspects. And we've actually invested heavily on the idea of evidence. We've partnered besides you guys, we've also partnered with companies like Sonar and ServiceNow and Atlassian and others for them to take things that they do within their guidelines and put it into a central location. And since it's digitally signed and connected to the actual piece of code, right? Whether the artifact, the binary that you're producing, including around models, this gives that ability for your legal teams to have some sort of accountability attributions and things like that that they need from a responsibility standpoint. If your customers ask you, hey, do you meet these guidelines? You have the ability to produce reports. And as you said, we've invested heavily in this. We actually even built an entire product called App Trust around this as a way for all these various tools that are out there to have a centralized location based on the binaries and artifacts and all the details on how they were tested, how they were scanned, all those things, including every phase of the SDLC. And even by the way, MLOps has its own SDLC. So making sure that all that evidence is there when you look at any individual binary artifact or release.
Yep. Yeah, I know it's a big area that you guys are focusing on. You've built an evidence partner program around it. That's where we are,
Mhm.
really capturing, productive insights that can just help these teams doing the build, doing the security, doing the compliance on it, just get more, attestation and confidence as they are thinking about pushing these things, through to production. So, a lot going on with evidence right now. TrojAI is participating in that, and we're just finding different ways to work with JFrog along this workflow to partner around it and send insights back. So we're excited about it. We're not going to demo it, but just so you can get a sense of how that works today, right? AI artifacts that are in your artifactory. There's specifications around what those models look like today, but those can be registered through TrojAI. For example, if it's a Hugging Face model that you've worked on and tuned, send it to TrojAI. We would perform our red teaming on it. We would give you a sense of where those weaknesses and vulnerabilities are through some of the things I talked about, like the single turn techniques, the multi-turn techniques. All of that data is sent back to JFrog. So this is a one-stop shop for your JFrog practitioner in Artifactory, looking at this and saying, hey, here's what we found as we were going through the test process. Here's where it, check the boxes. Here's where some things are that we might want to look at as well. So, right now it's been focused on the Artifactory lever, but Bill, you've talked a lot about catalog. Like that is another integration point that we're going to jump on with you guys. You guys are looking at MCP as well. There's a lot of different landing points here that can be extended now into TrojAI, where we can run tests, get insights, and send them back, and just really make this a kind of a circular motion and super easy for the practitioner. So something we're very excited about working with you guys on.
Absolutely. I'm very excited too.
Cool. So that wraps it up for us today. We really appreciate everyone jumping on. We did have a couple questions. I think we can just take a couple minutes here and get through them because it might be helpful. The first question I found was, I'm a JFrog Artifactory user. How do I get started with this? So, from our standpoint, you would want TrojAI Detect. This is our red teaming solution. Reach out to us. There's, go to our website. There's contact us. You would want that, and then the integration is pretty straightforward. Bill, on your side, they're Artifactory user. If they're looking for something like catalog, what's the best way for them to get started with that?
Yeah, reach out to your account rep
Okay.
out there, or if you're new, go to our website, set up for a trial. There's a little field in there. Say that you'd like to look at it, and we'll set you up. We'll have a meeting, probably with myself or maybe one of my team members. We can sit down and get you started and show you some best practices. But I would recommend if you're already one of our customers, go to figure out who your account rep is. Talk to them. We'll have that talk. And like I said, if you're new, do a trial. You'll have it enabled anyway, and we can go ahead and just you can try it out, and then you can set up some time with my team.
Yeah, awesome. This was an interesting one. We kind of touched on it, Bill, but it might be good to we can close out. how is the AI supply chain different from your traditional supply chain?
Absolutely.
I'll let you take a stab, and I can add some context.
Yeah. So the thing is that actually it's not too dissimilar. To be honest, that's the reason why we had decided to attack this head on. We actually, just so you guys are aware, we at JFrog actually started working on this actually about over 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, right? That's why we started our relationship with Hugging Face and others, because we saw this being a thing, and we said, you know what? The only difference is that the model itself is now the new entity into the supply chain, and we decided to take that head on. So the thing is that all the best practice that we've learned from years and years and years of building a supply chain product, we just applied it to ML and then went for the particulars on that.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and the last one, and I could jump on this one. AI red teaming is a new space. How is it actually being used at enterprises? As I kind of mentioned, right, there's this new element of protection that's required with the model layer that other solutions aren't going to get at. Understanding the AI behavior is going to become important. Testing that behavior to make sure that it's operating safely and securely is basically how it's being used. So we have customers that anytime they bring a model, for example, into the fold, they want to run this through red teaming to make sure that they are fully understanding of different vulnerabilities, risks, and weaknesses. That can be part of this. Going back to what we're talking about, this just becomes another step in the AI security supply chain as you're going from the discovery process through scanning to red teaming. We have different teams like AppSec, we have DevSecOps teams using this. We have red teaming and pen testing teams using this as well. So it really just is up to you, but really wanting to understand, how the model or your application or agent with the embedded LLM is working. Is it operating safely and securely? And how do I customize it for my use case is really what we're focusing on. So I think it's a good time for us to call it 46 minutes, Bill. We did pretty good here.
Yeah.
We really appreciate everyone spending some time with us. Please reach out to myself, Bill, our teams if you have any follow-up questions. And come find us at the next conference. We're around.
Hey, Christian and team, thank you for your inviting me here. Like I said, reach out to us, guys. We're all out there. We're always willing to talk about this. The reason why we do what we do.
Thanks so much. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Appreciate it.
Rock on, everybody. Be safe, be wonderful, be well.
Bye.
Cheers.